The fallout from the disgrace of cyclist Lance Armstrong just keeps on coming. Overnight, the International Cycling Union, known as the UCI, stripped him of his 7 Tour de France titles after accepting an American report on Armstrong's extensive cheating. The athlete could face legal action from angry former sponsors, and further investigations into cycling's doping culture are a certainty. Phil Liggett is an English commentator considered the voice of cycling. He joined me earlier from his home in England. Phil Liggett, the president of the International Cycling Union, says that cycling should forget Lance Armstrong. But doesn't the cycling world need to do just the opposite, do more investigation and more exploration of how cheating went on at these elite levels for so long?
Well, whichever way you look at it, the world of cycling will never forget Lance Armstrong, because this is the most incredulous doping scandal to hit sport of any type. But the UCI, when they say forget Lance Armstrong, I think that's more a figure of an expression. They will certainly continue their investigations, not just into Armstrong, but I think it'll now spread into Italy, where there's rumours that the doctors that were involved with Armstrong over the years appear to have numbered bank accounts in Switzerland. I'm not attaching this to Armstrong, but other riders have been named to be involved, and I think it'll be ongoing for a long time.
Does there need to be some investigation of the UCI itself, given that there are allegations Lance Armstrong gave them money, which raises conflict of interest questions?
Well, there's no doubt he gave the money. He did. It was around $100,000 donation he made at the time, and that was, the accusers say, was to cover up a positive dope test in Switzerland. But the lab only 48 hours ago said there was never a positive dope test in Switzerland. There was a suspicious dope test. So the two, I think, remain unconnected. But they admitted their error soon afterwards, that they should never have taken money from an active athlete in support of better doping tests. That, as far as the UCI is concerned, it was a different president through the era of Armstrong winning his races, Hein Verbruggen, who's now into his early 70s, but he never stepped away from the UCI. He became in the background behind the new president, which was Pat McQuaid. And I think that was an error. I think that, in all honesty, Hein Verbruggen, although he was good for the sport at the time and he's still involved, he should really distance himself from the UCI now, and allow Pat McQuaid his freedom to operate on his own. McQuaid's always said his priority was to fight drugs in sport, and of course in cycling was his priority. And that's what he's doing, and I think he should be given his chance now to progress.
You've had a bit to do with Lance Armstrong over the years. How do you imagine he's dealing with this situation, and do you think he'll ever admit anything?
I don't think he'll ever admit anything, because I don't believe he thinks he's done anything wrong. The two vital pieces of the evidence are missing, of course, a confession and a positive dope test. But obviously with the affidavits from all of the cyclists on his team, the whole world has now, I think, turned against him. And there's no doubt that there was some form of doping within by him, and we know by the rest of the team. I don't know how he's thinking right now. I know how I would feel, because not only has he lost all of his career since he was post-cancer in 1998 to date, everything he's won has been recalled. He's now facing a request from the organiser of the Tour de France, give us our $3 million you won back. There's insurance companies want a little matter of $7 million back, because he won this money off them for doing these extraordinary performances. I don't know how one could wake up in the morning and face this problem. I think the biggest thing that will hurt him is the fact he's been forced to resign from the Livestrong Foundation, which he created, and in which he's raised over $500 million for the fight against cancer. I think to have to turn his back on that as the chairman, I think that'll hurt most of all.
You said you believe that Lance Armstrong thinks he hasn't done anything wrong. In a recent statement, he said, "I know who won those 7 tours. My teammates know who won those 7 tours. It's the toughest event in the world where the strongest man wins." Is it possible that Lance Armstrong believes he didn't do anything wrong because everybody else was taking drugs too?
This may be the way he thinks. Sure, he's obviously, as has come out in the investigation, come through an era when it seems the majority of the big-name cyclists of that era have all been taking some form of drugs or other, or been on some program getting their supplies from, excuse me, disreputable doctors. So yes, that he could well see that as part of the competition, but I have absolutely no idea. But he wanted to win the Tour, and and he's obviously stopped at nothing to win the Tour.
You have been a very staunch defender of Lance Armstrong until recently. When was the moment for you that you realised you'd got it wrong?
Well, I didn't want to believe, of course, that Armstrong had gone through his whole career taking drugs, and he's brought a lot of pleasure to me as a commentator, and I hope I've conveyed that pleasure around the world. And I've worked with him on these cancer survival courses where we've gone cycling, where cyclists have paid up to $25,000 each to ride on these groups, and he's often gone away from a two-day event having put $2.5 million in the coffers of cancer survival at the foundations. And so, you know, I wanted to make sure that he was getting a completely fair trial. And whatever way you look at it, he certainly hasn't got that, because this has been the most public execution of an athlete in the history of sport. It wasn't allowed to do it all quietly. But my moment of actually turning, I think it was when all of his loyal sponsors decided that they couldn't support him anymore. And that was about 2 weeks ago, when Trek abandoned him, who have worked with him since day one. He developed their bikes with them, and they are, you know, he's ridden their bikes, and also all of his other big sponsors, Oakley, they pulled out this week as well. I think that's why he had to resign from his Livestrong Foundation. I think a deal was done that if you walk from the foundation, we will continue to put big money into that foundation. And I think that was the deal that was reached. But everybody, I think, has now left the side of Armstrong.
Phil Liggett, thank you very much for your time.
Pleasure.